Hello, I'm Tamasin Ford. Welcome to Business Daily from the BBC. Coronavirus has had a devastating blow on economies around the world. But in Africa, there's one sector that's booming.
One thing for sure is that the uptake of technology across the board has increased during the pandemic. So EdTech, FinTech, EdHealth.
We take a look at why.
Because of lack of infrastructures, most of the African entrepreneurs, they were already digital inclined. These key sectors, which had been invested in the past, we see that they actually have benefited a lot.
That's all in Business Daily from the BBC. Lockdowns across Africa have forced people to turn to cashless app-enabled solutions. Claud Hutchful is the CEO of Dream Oval, the technology firm in Accra, Ghana that launched Slydepay in 2015.
With Slydepay, you can download the application on the Play Store or on the iOS App Store. You can also access it on the web. And basically what happens is that we've onboarded various institutions, agencies and merchants who use Slydepay as a channel to receive payments for their goods and services. So during the COVID-19 crisis, of course we are still going through it, when our government initiated the lockdown, there were various services that had to continue business, right? There had to be business continuity. And because of the lockdown, people couldn't move about as freely. And so it now forced people to change their behavior and start using these platforms like ours that have been there for a while, right? Now it made sense, the value of what we provided. And as a result, people have experienced the obvious convenience, and over the period of the lockdown, it's reinforced the behavior. So because of that, we've seen a significant uptake in our transactions and usage of our platforms. Yeah.
So just give us an idea, when you say a significant uptake, what are the numbers involved?
So one of our major merchants, for example, was doing a couple of 100,000 a month, and in the month of the lockdown, it shot up to tens of millions, right? So it's really jumped up because all the traditional ways in which people could collect payments had been shut down. But the digital platforms like our Slydepay and other solutions that we have were the only means through which people could continue making payments. So it's a significant jump, right? Over 100%, I would say, yeah. For fintechs in this part of the world, what we've actually been doing is creating payment infrastructure, right, to digitalize payment, right? It's not as simple as just, let's say, setting up a mobile money network. You need to also change the way in which customers of merchants and agencies interact with their services, right? So am I able to digitally create an invoice? Is there a digital reference to the payment that I need to make, right? So various, in our part of the world, fintechs have been filling the gaps in terms of what is needed for a fully digital ecosystem. So when this happened, we had everything in place to make it work, and we've proven the point that it can work, and it is working, yeah.
As you said, people have changed their behaviour because they're forced to change because of the pandemic and the lockdowns. Do you think that will continue?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we offer convenience, right? It doesn't make sense to pick, in our part of the world, call a trotro, right? And drive to the bank and stand in a long queue just to make a payment when you can do it from the convenience of your home. So I think the behavior has been reinforced. People understand the value, and I don't think that they would want to go stand in the queues anymore, right? So, yeah.
But it's not just fintech solutions that have been in demand. While schools have been closed during lockdowns, the need for EdTech apps have soared too. E-health, another field that's boomed during the pandemic. Entrepreneurs have improved existing services or launched new ones, such as Kenya's Lara Health, Cameroon's WeCare and Ghana's Redbird. But why are African tech startups seeing this boom when others around the world aren't? A lot of it comes down to the lack of physical infrastructure on parts of the continent. For example, roads, electricity, hospitals, transport and water. In the last 10 years, entrepreneurs have increasingly used tech solutions to get around these problems. 2019 was a record year for investment in African tech startups, with more than $1.3 billion in funding. So when coronavirus hit, they were ready. Moses Acquah is the CTO of GreenTec Capital, an investment firm that supports African entrepreneurs. He's also the founder of the networking organisation Afrolynk.
No one expected this pandemic to happen, but I would say most of the African entrepreneurs, because they were already digital inclined because of lack of infrastructure. So a lot of the businesses have to make sure that they use digital solutions to engage their customers. It was a bit easy, but at the same time, you can see if the ones who are actually going to buy your services or your product are not able to go to work, raise capital, then definitely it affects you one way or the other. The whole value chain gets disrupted. So I would say that it's been a little bit tough, but at the same time, if I compare it to other continents or other countries, I would say that yes, they were a bit ahead of time in terms of digitalization, because a lot of the things had to be mobile, had to be done via virtual engagement. And so if you were not up to speed with engaging your customers mobile or digitally, then it's a problem. So I think that in that sense, and we've seen that most of the investment happen in either the fintech sector, happen in edutech, sectors whereby technology played a role. And so in that sense, they are not heavily affected. But of course, if they're one who is actually supposed to purchase the product or the service.
According to a recent report of yours at GreenTec Capital, entrepreneurs in Africa have a better chance of making it than their counterparts in the US or India. Does that ring true during this pandemic as well? This idea, as you say, that entrepreneurs had to be more digitally focused than entrepreneurs in other parts of the world because of the lack of infrastructure.
When we look at actually the true investment that actually happened on the continent, most of them were on the fintech side. And we can see there is a huge rise in the interest of fintech. Why? Because people were not able to move freely. People needed to do transactions. So for the fintech businesses, yes, there's been an increase, even to the point whereby, if you know of the mobile money, they had restrictions. So during the pandemic, they had to remove the restrictions to say you can actually do more transactions than ever before. So in that sense, yes, because they had already taken the step of being digital, definitely they had a chance of surviving and even actually having more probability of having a lot of success. Again, if you look at the logistics sector, you see that e-commerce was really rising very much in Africa. Competing with other, I would say, the people that actually started the frontiers that started e-commerce. And also because of this pandemic, there has been a huge increase in the demand for supply of services, supply of product. And so in that sense as well, I would say that yes, they were up in terms of acquiring more profit and more profitability. So because they were digital, technology played a key role. They were able to go globally, not only in their own focus countries. So we've seen what I will call an export of technology or export of solutions. So for instance, there were success stories in Kenya that quickly started being deployed in Uganda. I heard that it started also moving towards the West, which was in Nigeria. So you can see some of these things happening. But yes, to answer your question, they had an advantage because they had already implemented certain structures as compared to counterparts. Even, I would say, in Germany, for instance, if you look at mobile payment, it doesn't even exist in Germany. You go to a shop, you have to pay with physical cash. Even cards are not accepted. And so when you look at these differences and you see how small businesses on the continent were able to still continue transacting on mobile money, on fintech stuff, definitely they had a lead in that.
So you're saying actually that the pandemic has provided opportunities in certain areas, especially fintech and digital startups?
Absolutely. Let's put it this way. There has been traditional businesses have taken a huge hit, whilst digital businesses have actually gotten a lot of demand and interest, even to the point whereby they've also started seeing their own shortfalls, because people did not anticipate that there's going to be a quick rise in demand. And so I remember a couple of our startups calling and saying our servers are crashing. We need to optimize our system so that we can be able to take in more requests. So definitely digital technology focused businesses actually have gotten opportunities out of this pandemic.
Countries in Africa are still grappling with the pandemic. They haven't reported the alarming number of deaths and cases like countries in Europe, Asia, North and South America. But coronavirus has still affected their economies. Border closures, lockdowns, a slump in commodity prices, a drop in remittances. They've all taken their toll, but leaders in the tech community are still positive. Cameroon's veteran technology entrepreneur and one of Forbes Africa's 50 most powerful women, Rebecca Enonchong, is the founder and CEO of AppsTech, a global provider of digital solutions. She's also involved in several organisations supporting tech entrepreneurship in Africa.
Well, one thing is for sure is that the uptake of technology across the board has increased during the pandemic. And I think that where some sectors were very slow to adopt technology, I would say government and even private sector, smaller businesses, all of a sudden they discovered that technology was a useful tool. So a lot of companies and government officials were forced into learning new technologies and using these new technologies. And I think that that's a paradigm shift. So whereas before, people looked at it more as a competitive advantage, now the use of technology has become a complete necessity. We've seen such an uptake in learning using a mobile phone. Many mobile providers now, introduced these edtech solutions. And so I think that, we've seen a real difference made on the continent. Obviously, coronavirus and COVID have been devastating to our economies, but, these are some of the positive things that have come from it.
And how have you been affected, you personally, and the companies that you represent?
Well, it's been good and bad, right? So in fintech, edtech startups that I work with, they've done great. E-health as well have done absolutely fantastically. This is really good for certain industries. So edtech, fintech, ed-health. For the others, it's been incredibly difficult because of mobility issues, especially when you're in the B2B sector, which is, you can't just do it online, right? In the sales process, you really need to go and meet your customers face to face. That's an important part of B2B sales, unfortunately. And some of our startups clients have definitely been impacted. And because the customers are impacted. So if your customer base is in, like legal services, the courts are closed, and there's so much that your customers are suffering. And so that has obviously an immediate effect on your ability to sell them products and support them.
So this really has been a welcome boost for startups and entrepreneurs in the edtech, the fintech, the digital world across the continent. But what about the bigger issue that there is just much less money flowing around the world now because of coronavirus, and therefore less money going into Africa?
Well, so far we haven't seen that. We have not seen a decrease. In fact, there's been an increase in investments on the continent so far in 2020, including during the high coronavirus months. So we have not experienced that, but I'm sure sure that we will experience it soon. And that's where it becomes more important for us to grow our investment community on the continent, because we have not been as adversely impacted by the economic issues related to the pandemic. We are able now, we have to be able to leverage more African investments in African startups.
So you're hoping this pandemic will make people realise even more that Africa must be investing within itself?
Yeah, I think that there's a recent report that shows that about 28% of the funding that was invested in African startups in the last year has been African. So that 28% isn't a very low number. I think people were actually surprised that it was that high, but it's definitely not high enough to sustain the growth and the scale that we need for our startup ecosystem to succeed.
I'm Tamasin Ford. Our producer today is Vicky Broadbent.